Alrighty. Hi, y'all. I'm Katie Farr. I'm a student at Guilford College, class of 2024. Um, this is our afternoon panel talking about social justice opportunities. How can I engage with groups advocating for change with Maria Landy from Earlham, Windsor Jordan from Swarthmore, and Shane Creepingbear from Antioch. Naomi, do you want to go ahead and do agenda stuff?
Yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Naomi Medeiros. I'm one of the YAF Young Adult Friends co-clerks of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting and a graduate of Guilford College in 2016 and Union Theological Seminary in 2021. We're going to have some time to hear from our panelists this morning, and we'll also have time after that for questions. So what I'm going to do is I'll invite participants to introduce yourselves in the chat, share your name, where you're calling from, and what grade you're in if you're a student, or what grade your student is in if you're a parent. So you can use the chat function here for those questions. We'll start off with each panelist sort of introducing themselves and speaking a little to their relationship with the panel topic today, and then we'll shift to the Q&A after that. Katie and I will moderate questions from the chat with the help of Becca and Zachary, and we'll close at 10 till with a moment of silence. So if you want to use the chat function to introduce yourselves, students, parents of students. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Maria Landon, Earlham Plan for Integrative Collaboration Recruiter Associate Director, to start us off. Maria?
Yes, thank you so much, Naomi. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm happy to be here with you all. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Earlham College. As you might know, it's a Quaker college in the Midwest, small liberal arts. Give me just 1 second. Sorry, just my household is a little loud right now. Anyway, social justice is really at the core of what we do at Earlham College, and we care a lot about what students do in the classroom and also outside of the classroom. One of our core things that we have is the EPIC Centers, one of which is the Center for Social Justice, which helps students get the skills that they need in careers of social justice, or if they have a major that's not necessarily related to social justice, also help them be involved if that's something that they're passionate about. We have many different majors where students get choose from that are involved in social justice. Some examples are law and social justice. We have a program that prepares students who want to go into Peace Corps afterwards. We have things like environmental sustainability and also African-American studies, women, gender, and sexuality, and all these different programs. But it's not only what they do in the classroom, it's also what happens outside of that. We have, each year we take students to Spring Lobby Weekend, and where they learn how to lobby on different issues of social justice. We also organize the Davis and Earlham Peace Projects, where students can compete to create a plan on how they can positively impact their communities. And we also have programs like the Social Justice Corps, where they help the Center for Social Justice on campus and plan different events. And we also have different clubs, such as the Students for Free Tibet, the Students for Peace and Justice in Palestine, and Easy for Fair Labor. And so really, like, social justice is something that happens throughout a student's experience at Earlham College. At the graduate level, we also offer at Earlham School of Religion different programs, such as the Peace and Social Transformation that I was part of. And I'd be happy to talk more about that if that's something that folks are interested in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Next, I want to invite Windsor Jordan, the Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of Access and Equity at Swarthmore College, to share a brief intro with us. Windsor?
Sure, I'm so happy to be here. Welcome to our participants. Like Naomi said, I'm Windsor Jordan. I'm Associate Dean of Admissions and Director of Access and Equity at Swarthmore College, which means I read applications, travel around the country, recruiting students for Swarthmore, but also think about how we do that for students coming from first generation, low income, students of color, anyone traditionally marginalized in this process. I'm one person in the office that helps do that work. as well. If you're not familiar with Swarthmore, we're a small liberal arts college right outside of Philadelphia and have a Quaker heritage, but is our secular institution. In terms of how we're connected to the topic today, there's a couple different ways that students on our campus can get involved in social activism and thinking about how their academic interests are connected to the common good. And that's really kind of at the heart of what Swarthmore is all about, very much informed by the college's Quaker heritage. So the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility is one of the hubs on our campus where students can go and get funding for different projects they want to work on. The Lang Center offers a Lang Scholarship, which is a $10,000 scholar grant that students get awarded in their sophomore year towards a social or a common good project, right? That's going to change their community or change the world in some large way. $10,000, a lot of money. If that scares you as a student, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of money. They have smaller grants, $5,000 grants, $4,000 grants that you can do to do great work in your community or around the world. I used my social activism grant that I received to work with Upward Bound when I was a junior at Swarthmore, working with low-income students and students of color and other marginalized students, helping them on their path towards college. And now I'm an admissions officer for Swarthmore College. So you see how that works. A couple other kind of touchstones to raise up here are ways students learn about the social justice movements around the country, around the world. Our Peace Library is a depository for memorabilia and histories of social justice movements around our campus. French Historical Library on Swarthmore's campus is another hub that collects the histories of the Society of Friends, the Quakers, and then a place where students will go to do research on social movements and social justice movements around the country. And the campus itself has a history of activism. The reason we have a Black Cultural Center on our campus, the reason we have an Intercultural Center on our campus is because students, like they did in many colleges around the country in the 60s, agitated to push their colleges to be better for students who had been marginalized from those colleges. And so that social activism and activism piece is built in, I think, lots of ways into the Swarthmore body, student body, and amongst the faculty as well. Lots more to say about that, but I'll pause and let my other colleagues introduce themselves.
Thank you, Windsor. Last but not least, I want to welcome Shane Creepingbear, the Dean of Admission at Antioch College, to share a brief intro. Shane?
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the Dean of Admission here at Antioch College, but I also graduated from Antioch in 2008. In high school, I was sort of the, square peg, round hole situation, and people kept recommending Antioch to me. I was involved in activism and organizing in high school. We did, organized around nonprofits like No More Prisons and Food Not Bombs. And I was not disappointed when I found myself at Antioch. My second weekend, almost the entire campus were bused to DC to protest the World Monetary Fund. And so that was just sort of the opening for my trajectory at Antioch College. Through my work here in admission and through Antioch's own mission, I've been able to build ways of access for students from historically marginalized backgrounds. We meet full need for each student. We don't believe that cost should be a barrier to education. So Pell eligible students come to Antioch for free and their housing is covered. And so I'm just sort of laying the framework that Antioch is committed to social justice from its very inception. In 1852, our first president, who was Horace Mann, was quoted as saying to our first graduating class, "Be ashamed to die until you've won some victory for humanity." And that has carried through our organization and our mission for the last 175 years. Even the opening quote in the Fiske College Guide for 2022 is that we're part social activist, part granola, part anarchist, with plenty of none of the above mixed in. And it's through my work here in admission that I'm able to see ways to win those victories for humanity that that was sort of impressed upon our and alumni over decades and decades and generations. So I look forward to talking more about ways that social justice connects to your work as a student here at Antioch and well beyond your time on our campus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shane. I want to open up the conversation now for questions from the audience. You can type your questions into the chat and I can read them out loud. If we don't have any questions, I also have a few lists of some FAQs I can pose to our moderators, but I will wait a moment to see if any questions show up in the chat. All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, and I'll direct it to Maria first, but I'll have everybody, anybody who wants to answer the question can. But first to Maria, how does political life affect campus personality? And what does political life look like on campus?
That's a great question. I think our students are heavily involved with what's going on in our country and in the world. And we have room for discussion inside the classroom and also outside of the classroom, in the sense that there are a lot of clubs that follow political discussions and activism. And our students have the room to create those or participate those as they're able. As I was saying earlier, for example, the Students for Free Tibet or the Students for Peace and Justice in Palestine. Those are things that our students are heavily involved in, and not only internationally, but also politics in the US. So yes, there are discussions that happen inside the classroom, but also things that happen when they're not in class as well.
Thanks, Maria. Windsor or Shane?
Happy to jump in next year. So I think like Maria was saying about Earlham, the same thing is true, I think, at Swarthmore as well. And these conversations around political issues and around issues students want to advocate for happen in the classroom at Swarthmore and happen in terms of the student groups they create. So obviously, the last few years, climate change has been a big a challenge for the world and for the country, last many decades. But how that manifests itself on Swarthmore's campus is through a student group that's pushing the college to divest from fossil fuels, for instance, right? And holding and whether it's interjecting into board meetings or holding events on campus. They're not only doing that type of activism part, but they're also gathering research on the issue. What would happen if Swarthmore College were to divest from fossil fuels, in terms of what that means for our commitment to meet need-blind admissions and 100% need-based aid for all students on our campus, right? So they're not only getting the tools they need on the activism side in terms of action, but they're also getting tools they need on the academic side in terms of understanding a topic enough to be able to present in front of the board, be able to talk intelligently about it, and bring some evidence with them as well. So student groups are one way students get activated as well. And I talked before about the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility. And inside the Lang Center houses a couple different faculty-led projects as well. Keith Reeves, professor in political science, for instance, does a lot of work with prisons and education in prisons in the Philadelphia area. And so he teaches a course that is a blended course that includes inmates in the prison and Swarthmore students learning together over their time in the course. And he also has a number of different incarceration fellows that are supported by the Lang Center. These are students who are thinking and engaged on issues around incarceration and justice, right? So some of this work happens on the student side, some of this work happens on the faculty side, and then there's student groups just for political issues, right? So we have a conservative group on campus, we have students on the socialism side on campus who are thinking about politics in those barrels, and we'll bring speakers to campus and have workshops and bring those issues for the entire student body to debate as well. So there's issue conversations happening, there's activism happening on our campus, and there's clubs that are arguing about the political debates of the day that you might see on turn on your news and see as well.
We like to say that Antioch College builds activists, and there's many ways that we do this in a holistic way for students' entire experience here, through what they're engaging in the classroom, through what they do on their co-ops, which are full-time work experiences where students do leave the campus and work in jobs all over the country and all over the world. We empower students even through our own curriculum to design their own majors around the work that's most passionate to them. Students are involved in our governance structures at every level. So we have a community council where students are practicing organizing governance and actually have the ability to rewrite our own policy and reflect it on it and challenge it in some cases. When I was on the COMSOL governing body as a staff seat, the students identified that our parental leave policy was inequitable between faculty and staff, and they, through their own research, discovered that even our faculty leave was not long enough, so they were able to rewrite the entirety of our parental leave policy, make it more equitable across campus, but also in line with what other institutions are offering their community members. And we also have recently brought on 2 alternating student seats on our board of trustees. So they're have input at every level of governance. All of this comes into practice through the work experience in the co-op, how to employ your own passions in the work that you do and lead a meaningful life that isn't just career oriented, but to really help our students understand how they can have a positive effect on the world around them through the work in the communities that they choose to live in and be engaged in long after Antioch. That's reflected in the types of courses we offer. That's reflected in the types of self-designed majors our students are naming, articulating, their senior projects that they're engaging in. Just to give you some example of like what a student's trajectory through social justice work can look like at Antioch. One of our recent alumni, Chris Chavers, majored in social justice studies and community engagement. He did 3 co-ops. One was at the Transgender Law Center. One was with the law office of Philip Brigham in Chicago, and the other was with the American Friends Service Committee. He was then offered a full-time position at the Transgender Law Center before he graduated. He was on the board of trustees as the student seat and a representative on COMSOL. So he got to practice his work before he was kind of put out into the world to make change where he deems important. So those are just some of the sort of the tip of the iceberg ways that students can engage in social justice through their work and through their community here at Antioch.
Thanks, everyone. My next question I'm going to ask to Windsor, since you brought it up, Windsor, but I'm curious, what kinds of speakers has the college brought to campus? If there's certain speakers that stand out, certain events that stand out in your memory.
That's a good question. So a couple of ways to think about this question as well. So obviously there are yearly speakers that come to campus for different types of events. We have a McCabe speaker series that brings a speaker to campus, talk to our McCabe scholars and to the rest of campus about issues around leadership. Our Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility will bring speakers to campus to talk about social activism. They also host a resident scholar every year as well that will engage the campus in conversations around social activism and agitating and how to organize things like that as well. I think the speaker that comes to mind most recently is Brian Stevenson. Folks might be familiar. It was his work on incarceration and justice as well. So he was on campus, I believe, last year. Time is funny in the pandemic world, but I believe it was just last year. Was supposed to speak in person, but came, I think, virtually to us. to talk to the campus around his great work around agitating for justice in the injustice in the incarceration system in the United States. And so, but student groups will also bring speakers to campus as well that will speak directly to the needs of that particular student group. One of my favorite speakers that came back when we were on campus before the pandemic was Jeff Chang, who's a hip hop author, and talks about hip hop and social justice and activism as one unit. And so he was a great fan of his work. So he was brought to campus by the Intercultural Center that houses our LGBTQ student group, our Indigenous Student Association, our Latinx Student Associations, Muslim Student Association, and so those student groups came together to invite him to campus to talk about his work around hip hop history and activism in the hip hop world. So I think the great thing about one of the things that Swarthmore is able to provide students and our student groups particularly, we're a cash-free campus, and what that means is students don't pay for any events, speakers, lectures, party performances they want to go to on our campus. And that means all events on campus are open to anyone without having to worry about how much money you have in your pocket every given day. So it kind of evens the playing field for students to participate in events, but then student clubs are also given funds that they can then go use to bring speakers, lecturers, to hold workshops of their own to campus beyond what a department might bring in terms of a speaker or a lecturer, beyond what a center on our campus like the Center for Innovation and Leadership or the Intercultural Center or Black Cultural Center, the First and Low Income Student Office will bring to campus. And so student groups are empowered to do that work, and then can also partner with other organizations around campus and bring different speakers to campus on any topic they wish to explore.
Thanks so much, Windsor. Maria and Shane, are there any speakers that stand out on your campuses?
Yes, I don't have the full list, but the ones that stand out from most recent years, we had Angela Davis come to our campus, which was a great privilege to be able to have her. We also had Linda Sarsour a couple of years ago, who was one of the people who led the Women's March in 2018. And I think most recently, Sinclair Jedrick Jules, who wrote A Beautiful Black Hair. That was a very popular event in the last couple of months that we were able to have. Obviously, a lot of things have paused because of the pandemic, but we're starting to bring back some of these events that students are really interested in.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a big asterisk next to this because we really haven't had guests on campus for the last couple of years. But we do have a community meeting every week here on campus where we bring students, faculty, staff together. We've recently been holding them virtually and a hybrid in person, so you can come in person. In the past, they were always in person. But at these community meetings every week, we have guest speakers who come from different organizations, whether it's to provide campus-wide trainings on what it means to support trans students on campus, to talking with Indigenous activists about food sovereignty initiatives around the country. We are constantly bringing in and seeking input from other communities and bringing folks in. Recently, a couple of years ago, I guess, I organized a water protectors panel where we brought in Indigenous thought leaders, elders from around the country to talk about their work in protecting water rights, specifically sort of around oil pipeline activism. We also have a common Friday forum event where we bring in folks who have different positions on opposing like issues and have a open conversation and dialogue between them. So there's a lot that happens on campus with respect to speakers and bringing people to campus and seeking out folks who are really pushing the conversation forward in terms of social justice, social movements, and liberatory politics in the United States.
Wonderful, thank you all. I'm I'm wondering about this sort of in line with our last question, but what are the campus free speech policies where you work, or how does the campus talk about, reckon with, explore free speech? And that's to all three of you. So whoever wants to take that up first, it's a big question.
Happy to kick us off here. What comes to mind when I think about that is a conversation we've been having with our students the last few years is how do we have dialogue about issues as opposed to debate. So I think I often describe it as debate as being when you turn on your television sometimes, or maybe opening a newspaper, you see two people kind of on opposing sides of an issue, supposedly yelling at each other. And that's what we often call debate. What we've been trying to talk to our students about is how do we have dialogue about really tough and challenging issues, whether it be things like issues around climate change and how the college and individuals act responsibly around climate change, or whether it be issues of race and gender and class and identity, and what that means for our student body and what that means for the conversation that the nation is having around some of these issues. As well. And so how do we create spaces where students and faculty and staff together can have engaging, challenging, instructive dialogue about these issues where we're doing as much listening as we're doing talking? Are we sitting in each other's shoes and trying to be in each other's minds a little bit in those conversations? And so our Center for Innovation and Leadership, our Dean's Office here at Swarthmore, who thinks about issues of community and engagement, have held a number of workshops and speaker series about kind of how we build dialogue and space for dialogue. One thing that's really important about colleges is that there's spaces where students can come and learn how to talk through really tough, hard things and learn how to think together about really tough, hard things. They're training grounds for how to be thought leaders and how to build consensus and how to be in environments where people think differently than you do and come to terms with that and move forward still, right? And so the conversations folks have at colleges can be uncomfortable and challenging and difficult. And that's kind of the point, right? That's kind of the point. You get to try ideas out, but you want to do it in a supportive and safe environment. But I think colleges are space where that can happen. And so one of the things we've been thinking a lot about at Swarthmore is how do we have those conversations responsibly? How do we empower students to have those conversations? How do we help students understand how to do that well, so that they go off into the world, they continue to have those conversations, and so we can have better dialogue as a nation about some of these things, and we can come to solutions around really tough, challenging issues that we're dealing with. So I don't know if that pinpoints the kind of first free speech question, but it does pinpoint, I think, how we try to go about some of those things at Swarthmore.
I think a lot of us grow up with the notion that free speech is really this idea that you can say whatever you want without repercussion. At Antioch, our students are really challenging that narrative around what free speech is, who it's for, who it should protect, who has access to platforms, and why it's important to acknowledge that free speech is not something that's in support of everybody. We don't necessarily have to listen to people with damaging, dangerous, or violent ideas, dehumanizing ideas. And that's a lot of the conversation about platforming and what it means to be responsible with our work in social justice at Antioch.
Something that I really like about Earlham students, and I am an Earlham alum myself, is that we're really outspoken. But I agree with Shane that there is an issue with thinking about free speech in terms of like, we can just say whatever we want, and we also have to think about how we hold people accountable when what they say is harmful. I think one of the advantages of being funded in Quaker values is that we aspire to give a voice to everyone, especially those voices who have historically been unheard. And so we're not perfect, and that's a conversation that we continue to have. We do have different platforms for students to raise their concerns. For example, we have Earlham Student Government, or we have sessions where the students can meet with the dean on one-on-one and express their concerns about all different topics. But it is a constant conversation, I think, and it's one that we all should be having about who is speaking, who is having a voice on the table.
Thank you all. And so we've talked about sort of the ways that social justice happens on campus and between students and different programs, events, staff, et cetera. And I'm wondering if we can talk more about how what happens on campus impacts the wider community, the community around the college. And I'm wondering, Shane, if you would mind speaking to that, since your comment on parental leave is connected to this, I think. But how does what happens on campus impact the community, the neighborhood that the campus is located in?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of ways to connect these. Because of the nature of our cooperative education program, where we're sending students into different communities all over the world, we do have a pretty wide reach with respect to this. And we're already challenging our students to think critically about the work and the world around them, and how they're navigating different spaces and places. So they take that with them, they develop as people, they come back to campus, and that really drives a lot of the conversations that are happening on campus, of course. And I think everybody sort of benefits from this process of co-oping, going out in the world, expanding your horizons and coming back. We have a number of local co-ops called Miller Fellowship positions here in Yellow Springs, Ohio, in this already progressive town that's grown up around our pretty radical college. But students can work part-time jobs or full-time co-op jobs in nonprofit organizations all throughout Yellow Springs. These organizations are things like the school board, the Yellow Springs School Board. We have our own district here. We have an organization called Home Inc., which is committed to providing access to affordable housing for folks in and around Yellow Springs. The Senior Center here, the Arts Council, Agraria, which is committed to finding new and better ways of relating to the earth and the land that we're on. And so there's a lot of opportunities just in how our students are engaging directly with the community here. Of course, these conversations happen all throughout the college, and students will go out into the world and explore, and then come back to the college and help help us be incredibly self-reflective about who we are as an institution and how we can better our own work and how that impacts the lives of people in our community. We have a really strong relationship with the Dayton Women's Correctional Facility here, where students are doing things like, one example that comes to mind is a recent graduate named Odette Chavez Mayo, who majored in photography. But her senior project was with incarcerated women who are serving life sentences. It was a self-portrait project that helped the women in the project foster agency and hold space to have that freedom and curiosity to explore their own selves through creative images, free from dehumanization, and to combat harmful, oversimplified narratives of what it's like to be incarcerated. And so these sort of opportunities that the students are taking on aren't just something that affects them or helps them grow professionally and personally. Oftentimes, these are with organizations that have deeper commitments to social justice, social movements, social organizing, and help our students develop directly in those types of ways.
Thank you, Shane. Maria or Windsor?
Yeah, there are a lot of examples, but I guess I'll focus on two, the most recent ones. This past March, 15 students traveled to DC, as mentioned earlier, for Spring Lobby Weekend, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and they learned how to lobby on a pathway to citizenship for all immigrant communities. And it was a very powerful experience because not only did they get to hear about different speakers, they also actually get to meet in person with different Indiana legislators, and they got to advocate for a pathway to citizenship for immigrant communities to them directly. And that was a very powerful experience. And because of Indiana's politics, I can't tell you that they were convinced. However, I think that those, have a positive impact in some way, like planting some seeds. I truly believe in that. The second example that I have is our students noticed the different pays that some of the workers, for example, facilities or housekeeping, were having. And so they, like students themselves, created a club to support that and to bring this concern to the higher powers at Earlham College, like meaning president, et cetera, to know that this was a concern. And they continue to work on different issues of like fair labor and how we treat people in our community. So that was very powerful to see.
I'll just offer up a couple of examples from Swarthmore. Talked before about the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility here at the college. One of the things they do is work closely with the community of Chester, which is the nearby community to Swarthmore, Black and Brown community, about 10 minutes from campus. And they have a Chester Fellows program that invites students to work at different nonprofits in Chester. They intern for a number of days out of the week throughout the semester, throughout the year, with community engaged nonprofits in the Chester community. Another example that comes out of the Lang Center is coming up soon as they're engaged scholarship symposium. Lang Center thinks about engaged scholarship as how the Lang Center connects the curriculum that students are learning, our campus, and the community surrounding Swarthmore in Philadelphia. As well. So engaged scholarship, I'll put a link in. I'm going to it next week. I'll put a link in it so you all can go if you want to next week. I think they're still taking registrations for it, but the whole idea of the symposium next week is to talk about all the different ways and give some examples of all the different ways that Swarthmore faculty and students are engaging in the communities around them, using their scholarship towards making the world a better place in really active ways. So I'll just drop a link for that symposium happening next week. If folks want to join to learn more about Swarthmore and all the different ways that folks are connecting with the community to make change.
Wonderful, thank you all. Before we close, I wanted to offer a moment here for any questions from the audience to be shared in the chat, and or for any questions that our wonderful panelists might have for each other, or any burning, exciting topic that you really want our audience to know about.
I just want to say to Shane how excited I am about the equitable parental leave, and that's something that I would love to see at Earlham, and that I'm probably going to follow up with.
I think I'll jump in to say too. I think so, and I want to preference this with students come to all our campuses to engage in lots of different ways, lots of different things. I think sometimes students feel pressure to engage in particular ways, and so if you have a student or if you are a student yourself who's like, oh, I'm a little bit, I want to just go to college and do my academic work and get stuff done. I think all our campuses will give you opportunities to think through these things and engage in these things how you want to. And engage in those conversations. So part of going to college is expanding yourself and opening yourself up to other opportunities beyond what you thought yourself. So we'll help you do that and engage in ways that you're comfortable to engage at any of our institutions.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know how thankful I am to hear from everybody. I think I'm not even sure if it's been articulated how deeply a lot of us are connected, even, Guilford, our current president, our recent president was the recent president at Guilford. She just went to Swarthmore for some sort of symposium on higher education and immigration. Earlham, we're in a college consortium together called the Great Lakes College Association. We organize with our staff of color. And so I just want to acknowledge that there's deep connections between all of our institutions, and there's alignments in a lot of the work that we're engaging in and helping our students engage in. And I'd love to see deeper connections grow through our institutions.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your time. I think at this point, Becca and Zachary, I'm going to close with a moment of silence unless there's anything else we need to have said today.
Yeah, just thank you so much, Naomi and Katie and all of our panelists. This was a really special panel, actually. I really appreciated the conversation today and appreciate all your time. So thank you. Thank you, Naomi.
All right, let us close with a moment of silence and gratitude for our communities, our panelists, and our students and young people.